Well, all right, what's happening? It's me, Robert Phoenix. It is Sunday night, and you are here for Sunday Night AstroLive. And I hope everybody has had a wonderful weekend wherever you are and whatever you've been doing, whether it's relaxing or working. Some people work on the weekend, some people do both. Some people manage to have their work be relaxing, believe it or not. I'd like to think that I'm one of them, although every now and then I get a little wound up. But tonight we kind of stretch out and get into some deep astrology, and we'll touch on a few things. There's a lot going on in the world. Have you been noticing? I'll tell you what's really popping and that nobody's really talking about. And I was wondering when it was just going to be a matter of time, because if there was going to be one country in the world where the local citizenry would stand up to what would I call them? The NPCs running their government and allowing unchecked migration into their country, it would be the Irish. And I was right, because over the last week, the Irish have been raising hell. They've been taking on the police in skirmishes, and they've actually had to mobilize, whatever version of the Irish army. The Irish people have had. They've. This is a excuse me, a culture that has historically been pugnacious and has been taken over, at least twice, clearly once by the English and the Anglicans. And there may have been another period where they may have been taken over as well, because those were like the Irish are like major players in the cosmology of like Tartaria and these ancient trade routes and basically populated by one of the sons of Noah, right? I mean, this is where how far. I mean, they had giants come in, and there's a lot going on in Ireland, right? And the most recent troubles they had were with the English, and basically settled that for the most part, probably about 20 years ago. But then, they had another invasion, and the invasion is the migrant invasion, and mostly from Africa. And the African population showing up there is saying that they are the rightful heirs to Ireland, right? Like they're the Black Irish, and they have more of a right to Ireland than the people who were born and raised and indoctrinated into the culture there. So the Irish have had enough. They're pissed, and they're at war with their own government. That's pretty telling, actually. The other thing, I guess, from a big news cycle perspective, although you won't hear a lot about the Irish uprising, but of course it's Aries season, and people are going to be a little feisty. That's the nature of the beast. People are going to be a little feisty during Aries season. The other big news story, I mean, Jesus, I mean, they're popping up like mushrooms. The unannounced Melania Trump speech, press conference, 6 minutes of what the fuck. Now, Melania is a heavy Taurus. We might look at her chart tonight just to see what's going on in Melania's chart. We may take a stop along Melaniaville. But the story there gets really quite dark. And it involves a woman who was an Epstein girl and knew Melania from the Epstein days, and wound up getting married, and I forget what her husband does, but it's not insignificant, and got into a major custody battle with the son of her and her husband. We'll get into some of the details. I can look the story up. And the Trump administration wound up sicking ice on this woman and then sending her back to Brazil, which is where she was from. And then as a result of that, the father went down and grabbed the kid. And she knows all about Melania. And she's pissed because her husband took her out of the country. And then, of course, there'll be no ramifications for the abduction of the son who went to Brazil with the mother. Now, I don't know what the terms of the agreement with the husband was, whether she could leave the country or not. I don't know. Maybe she couldn't. And he was like, well, that's illegal, bitch. I'm taking him back. But from what I can ascertain from the tone of all this is that she's not happy. And now, what's interesting about the timing of the Melania press conference is that it happens after this woman starts to bark from Brazil. And now all of a sudden, Melania wants to get out in front of the story. And it's a very strange position to take because on the one hand, she is advocating for these women to be heard. And we know that her so-called husband doesn't really feel the same way. He just wants to put that in the past and just keep on winning, right? So to Melania's credit, she's standing up for the Epstein girls. However, she also basically did like a Bill Clinton, like, I never had sex with that woman. She said, I never knew. Like, come on. There's pictures of you kissing Jeffrey fucking Epstein. Okay, they're not AI. You're mentioned in the emails. There's a really, really good chance you might have been, one of his temporary girlfriends for a while, and got set up to hook up with Donald Trump. Now, I just watched an interview with Alex Jones. I guess the guy that he lifts weights with at a gym in Austin has a podcast. Everybody has a podcast now. So he was on this guy's show. This is today. And he was talking about the Melania thing. And I have something to add on top of it. So what Alex Jones said is that from his insiders, that he knows inside the administration that Melania detests Donald Trump. Absolutely detests him, and can't stand being in the same room. Now, what I have heard, and I don't have any insiders, but snaking through the pipelines of the internet, you find things. And one of the things that I ran across was that Melania Trump signed a 20-year contract with Donald Trump in 2007, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 2007, either 2007 or 2006. And the contract runs out this year. They're done. So at some point in 2007, Melania Trump will exit the picture. She will exit the White House. or if she's in the White House still, it'll be just perfunctory. It'll be the back end of the deal. And again, according to the, and I'm not alone on this one, right? But according to the sources, is that she really soured on Trump with the Stormy Daniels thing and it going public. She may have known about it behind the scenes, but imagine you being Melania Trump and you're Donald Trump's wife, mother of his son, his now filthy rich son, and you're being dragged through the mud. I mean, you are on track for being the first lady of the United States, and you're being dragged through the mud. And so that was really when things started to go south between Donald Trump and Melania. And again, this is stuff that most of you have probably heard. She spent most of that first term in New York City. Who was around Trump in the first term? It was Ivanka and it was Jared. And I've heard that Melania doesn't like Ivanka very much. Well, they're opposite signs, right? Ivanka's a Scorpio, Melania's a Taurus. You get that rivalry sometimes. Opposite signs, right? With opposite sex, or same sex rather. And she doesn't like Jared either. So they're there for the majority of the first term. She's not. She's in New York. And then, of course, the rumor at that point was that she was deep in the throes of an affair with her bodyguard. So this whole idea that Melania and Donald are this perfect first couple is really not true, right? And so I believe that even though it was, and I have no way of backing this up, okay? So there's no paper trail, there's no receipts, but I think she was told by Donald Trump to do that press conference, and that she needed to get out in front of it. And that's something that Trump has done throughout his professional and political career. He'll get out in front of the story. Like, for instance, the grab by the pussy, like he knew that was coming out. And so what he did is he staged the leakage of the tape, right? And he did it in his own, like, he wanted to be more in control of that information than had it gone through another channel, right? So Trump was kind of out in front of that whole, like he jumped, like apparently there's going to be this huge expose. And you think, well, could have been a bigger expose than it was. Yes, I think so. And what he did is he got out in front of it, exposed it, and beat the people who were going to run a much bigger story to the punch on it. So he kind of cut the legs out from under the lead. So Trump, I think, has the history of doing stuff like this. And I would not be surprised if he told Melania to go do that. I would not be surprised. Right? Now, who has taken over for Pam Bondi as the Attorney General? Lee Zeldin. And Lee Zeldin is a member of Chabad. So I don't think Lee Zeldin is going to put his foot to the accelerator anytime soon. And with the war going on, whatever this war is, are Congress going to be that eager to stick their toes back into the Epstein pool? I don't know. Maybe. Depends on their political aspirations or machinations, either one. So that's an interesting story. We'll take a look at Melania's Trump tonight. Trump. Melania's chart. We'll take a look at her chart. You know, I've been following this stuff and these people for years. And I've always said, and this is based on her chart, that once Melania is done with Donald Trump, which is going to be about a year from now, she will leave the country. She will wind up returning to Europe and will probably, marry some, rich count or something like that and spend the rest of her days living in a castle somewhere in Moravia or something like that, right? Like I could see that with her. And I often felt that Barron would wind up leaving the country too. And that was based on this chart as well. So we'll get into that. We'll get into a bit of the Melania chart. We'll look at the chart of the moment tonight. We got Mars and Aries. Anybody feeling the Mars and Aries? Man, I could totally feel it. So on Friday night, we decided, it's like sometimes I don't like to have a plan. I've got a Jupiter-Uranus trine in my chart. I trust that when I get into something, the plan will unfold. By the way, if you haven't seen Friday's show, it's the first edition of Astro Sounds. And I get into Elvis Presley and Elvis Presley's chart and how astrologically it is the birth of rock and roll. You can see it in the chart, and not only in his chart, but in the chart of Sam Phillips, in the chart of Sun Records, Sun Studio, his first release, Capricorn, Aquarius, Cancer, overlap. So if you haven't seen that, check it out. I think it's it's got a, there's always something slightly political in the air, right? Slightly something political, so you're always going to get a little bit of that, but it's a far cry from, breaking down things at a global level. So if you want to take a break and have a different kind of interaction with astrology, check out the show from Friday. Well, we'll be doing one of those a month on Friday. So kind of diversifying the Friday fare a little bit and giving you guys some different content to chow down on. And the music thing, people have been asking me about that for a while. So coming in from two different directions, Lana was telling me that she'd love to see music astrology show. And then I had a great series of texts and a phone call with Peter Bayonne last week. And he said the same thing. So between the two of them, we got off to a good start, a rockin' start with Elvis. And I think you'll enjoy that. So shout out to Peter and Lana. One of these days, I'd like to just get Peter on the Friday show, and we could just talk music. And Peter is a really accomplished musician, and he's toured with a lot of really well-known artists and acts like Dave Matthews, and so he's no lightweight, and he knows a lot about music, and he's got a fair understanding of astrology. So maybe one of these Fridays, Peter and I will sit down and we'll map out something and we'll talk shop. I think it'd be kind of cool. He doesn't know about that yet, though. I just brought it up. So yeah, check that out. It's a pretty good offering, I think. What else? What else are we going to talk about? Chart of the moment, Mars and Aries, conflict, war in the air, checking all those boxes. Oh, Friday night. So the plan, right? This is where it all started. I'm not going to give you the secrets behind the show. I can't do that. I was going through my brain. Should I tell them the secrets behind the show? I can't do that. So Friday night, where do you want to go? I don't know. I'll know when we see it. Sounds like, okay. So there's this place called The Boat. And it is it looks like a boat from the outside. You walk up the gangplank, and it is kind of a bar and grill. Get drinks, cocktails, beer, wine. It's on the river. Burgers, sort of a Cajun Creole thing going on there. You get some gumbo. Says, let's go to the boat. So we go to the boat. We get a table on the river. And I got to tell you, it was just around sunset. It was beautiful. It was, one of these spring days in Texas. You just take a picture because pretty soon it's going to get unbearably hot. But it was a beautiful night. We're on the deck, no mosquitoes. They're not around yet. Right. So we sit down and, we figure out we're going to. So the waitress comes over. She's born with 2000 and 2006, I think 2006, pretty sure. And boy, she is just chatty Cathy, right? Chatty. And we're mildly entertained by this person, right? Because she's a trip, right? Like she's quirky, very quirky. And so I asked her, I said, so what's your astrological sign? She said, I'm a Taurus. I said, you got some Gemini in you. Because, and I said, let me look up your ephemeris. One of the ephemeris, I looked up her, it's called a solar chart, right? So the natal chart is when we look at the wheel. The solar chart is just the line of code on the ephemeris. That's what it's called. It's called the solar chart. And sure enough, Mercury in Gemini, 0 degrees. Talking about chatty Cathy, right? So then she goes on to tell us about her father who just got out of prison. And some of these small town stories will blow your fucking mind, right? And it's kind of like, whoa, really? Oh, so that's what goes on. Anyway, he just got out of prison. And I'm like, well, what did you go to prison for? Oh, well, he choked me and my siblings. You mean choke? Yeah, choke. And there was a legal term for it, respiratory something. And one day she went to school and she had marks all over her neck. And the school called CPS, and next thing you know, the guy's on his way to fucking being arrested, right? And I think he did 4 years in prison. And I said, oh, so you're a Taurus, right? And I went back and I looked at her solar chart, and her sun is conjunct Algol. And I said, have you ever heard of Algol? And she didn't know about Algol. So I told her about Algol, and I told her about the connection between strangulation, beheadings, alcohol, right? All these things that we know and talk about with Algol. And she was kind of blown away. And so were we, right? That's like astrology in action. It was mind-blowing, right? It was really mind-blowing. So she was a lot of fun. She was a good sport. So her phone rings, and I see the name on it. It says Bubba, right? And I said, here, let me answer that. And she let me answer her phone. And I put the phone up to my ear, and I go to my deepest voice I can. I say, hey, what's up? And he's like, oh, so is Lauren there? I said, yeah, she's right next to me. Hold on. Now, I didn't know if it was her boyfriend or not, right? So I gave the phone over to her. And she started cracking up. Turns out Bubba is her younger brother, who just turned 21 and is now hot to trot and ready to party. But it was a lot of fun. And, it was just, I keep bringing up this concept of Aries and the magician because there's energy, right? There's energy in the air, and the magician is theoretically the first card in the major arcana, and it's connected to magic. And this is a very magical, Aries is a very magical season, believe it or not. Really between now and the summer solstice, this is in the Northern Hemisphere. No matter what they tell you, Christmas, this is the most magical time of the year. Things are growing, things are alive, life force is shooting up through the earth, right? So when that happens, the potential for the expression of energy becomes much greater. And magic is also built around energy as well, right? So anyway, it was a fun night. And I think we were her only table. And she was with us for, I don't know, 25 minutes. I mean, I think she wanted to sit down and just hang out with us. But she was entertaining. You never know what you're going to find. And her stories were, I'll give you one more little tidbit. So her father got engaged. He's now living somewhere in Illinois. And he's a welder for oil derricks or rigs underwater, right? And those jobs they pay pretty well, and they're kind of dangerous. I'm not sure he learned that in prison, but anyway, he gets out of prison and he's engaged to get married. And so what did she do? She put together a whole portfolio of the charges and the abuse that he laid on her and her family and sent it to her just so that she would be informed. That is some Gemini shit to do, right? The girl's like 20, I think she's like 21 years old, maybe 20 at the most. And she's like playing a whole different game. You never know what you're going to find in a small town. You never know. All this area is active in my third over my sun, Mercury, and Jupiter. Oh boy. You were so bad. You laughed. You laughed your ass off. You thought it was funny. I thought it was funny too. Ron Mika say hello. Hi, it's Magic Mika. Hi, Magic Mika. Tell Ra I said hi. I feel it, man. Mars and Aries making me firing. Good. Friday's show was fun. Sounds good. Yeah, we'll do some more. Yeah, we'll get John Peter. We'll talk music and astrology one of these days. And you can tell us tales from the road with Peter Bayonne. And what a great guy Dave Matthews is. Let's see. What else do we have here? Great idea for a show. I've had a headache all day. I feel that. Hey, man, Aries, right? Aries. I've heard salt works really well with headaches, believe it or not. Let's see. Yeah, Kelly Zat. Hi, hey, you got a Tundra site. Hi, Kelly Zat. There's a comet passing through between the Earth and the Sun later in the month, might affect our already weakened magnetosphere. I'm sure Artemis took care of that. Yeah, Roger Waters, David Gilmour, opposite signs. Yep. Pisces, Virgo. They starved the Irish to death in the past. Hope the Irish will learn to stand up this time around. I agree with you. But they are not they're not uncomfortable with conflict. Let's put it that way. And conflict is no stranger. Iran has the Epstein files unredacted. They probably have the B files as well. Yeah, I've heard that about Iran. Isn't that what happened with Kash Patel? Didn't they do a little cash splash? Yeah. Okay. I wish I could get ICE to deport anyone that vexes me. I know. Got a beef, call ICE. Let's see who else we have here. Peter said, yes, I read a paper on sodium intake and migraines. Yeah, that's what I've heard. Right there. Aries with Mars return. Right on, Rand. Yeah, real salt, though, works for me. Yeah. Let's see. Underwater welders can't get insurance, too high risk. That's interesting to know. Thank you for support. Everything went way better than I expected. I now have a new career and very well supported. Food money. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. Good for you, Leonie. We got a Janine sighting. We got a Robin Dan sighting. Congratulations, Leonie. Got a Rafi sighting. Let's see. Anybody else? I think we're caught up here. Did I say hi to Janine? There we go. I think I did. All right. Why don't we start here? I thought it'd be kind of a fun way to. I gotta put this up here. Please, everyone, take a moment, hit the like on this broadcast. It does help this channel circulation. Every little bit helps. Every little bit helps. Those Lego videos are, I think you missed the top of the list in your acknowledgments. What's that? Oh, Michael, California Contrarian, Privacy Scum, Anti-Scum. Yes, yes, yes. The great Susan Waite is here, misbehaving too. Oh, and there's Barbara Booties. That's my new nickname for Barbara Booties. Had a great conversation with Susan and Chad the other day. Boy, it was amazing how many like our paths just were intertwined. You know, living in San Francisco at the same time and living in Seattle at the same time. And we just compared notes for hours. That was so cool. Trinity Productions, Julie Sunshine. Hi, Julie. Big cat lady. Let's see, there's Darlene. Can't wait to hear some sense. I'll do my best because some of this shit makes no sense at all. But I think the thing with Tucker tonight, you'll walk away with a greater understanding of astrology in action because we're watching it real time with them. Who else did I miss? I missed Amy Gill. Hi, Amy Gill. No one you know. Welcome back. Gucci Goats. Hey, Jake. Kelly Boyles, here we go again. They say the same shit wherever they go. Oh, man. I'm mostly Irish with Scottish and Native American. Oh, you're fiery. So when you drink, which one wins out? The Irish or the Native American? That's what I want to know. I definitely have Irish in me. Definitely have Irish in me. I have it. And not something I'm proud of, but I can outdrink probably 95% of you. Just saying. But that was a long time ago. Let's see who else do we have. MSJ, what's up? David Icke did a very good interview on Rumble, laying out and answering the question why Israel has the power. David. Robert, we might have crossed paths. You used to live in a college back then, hanging out with some of the musicians' teams. Could be. Hey, we got Lewis Walden, Southwest Florida home expert. Lewis, how's the market? Can you give us a market update real quick, Lewis? What's up, Belkel? I feel like the out drinking Also the Sag in you. Yeah, Jupiter and Sag first house. I was always, I tell you what I would do with drinking. I was always able to get right to the edge, right? Like I'd get right to the edge. And I learned how to like surf the edge. I would rarely would I go overboard. Like I could count on my hand, like one hand, the times I've had like really serious hangovers. But I learned how to go right to that edge and just kind of ride the curl, using a surfing term. It was more about the experience. Run it back, Robert. I'm overdue. You gotta wait. You gotta wait till my heart gets like fixed. When my heart gets fixed, we'll run it back at least once. All right. Let's see what. Or the higher the IQ, the more alcohol you require as well. When I was living in Fredericksburg, I must have been a fucking genius. Let me tell you, because I had reached the pickled stage. So here we go. For Southwest Florida, has been my best season since 2022. Finally starting to recover from Hurricane Ian. All right. Good job, Lewis Walden. Way to go. Scorpio rising control. Yeah, pretty good. I was pretty good at that. Yeah. I've always been the designated driver, and not in the way that you would think. Founders and Corona. Corona is a bad beer. It's a horrible beer for you. For people out there still drinking Corona, you may want to rethink it. It's not a good beer at all. Kelly's that Irish and Russian. Oh, that is a combo right there. Ooh. That's a combo. The Russians can fucking drink. What else? Well, Lewis, we hope you are continuing to experience success in helping out the good people of Southwest Florida find the home of their dreams. All right, why don't we do this? Had a shiner last night. Didn't help my headache. What you need one of those Mexican beers with the salt around the rim. That will help your headache. See, then you could have had a beer and the salt, and it might have helped your headache. Just saying. Native American Irish with some European. That's always an interesting blend. Good idea. Salsa and chips too. There you go, Tim. Just bring enough for the rest of us. All right. I thought it'd be kind of a fun thing just to look at some birthdays today. Why don't we start there? We'll ease into the show. Let's check out some birthdays. Tecate's not bad. I like Bohemia. If I was going to drink a Mexican beer, Bohemia would be a good one. Let's see. It's going to be black, so we'll stop sharing. And let's just take a look at some April 12th birthdays. If I find one that's interesting, we'll stop. Check it out. Let's see. So far, the A's. Not grabbed. Dennis Banks was speaking of Native American, he was a Native American activist. Dennis Banks and Russell Means. They both wound up going to jail. They were part of the occupation of Alcatraz. And there he is right there. He was in The Last of the Mohicans. Look at that. Dennis Banks and Russell Means. And he's got Mars in the 12th house. And he was part of the takeover of Alcatraz. That's classic. Totally classic. Yeah, that's when Native American activism was really happening. Back in the this guy has 20 fucking children. 20 children. Damn. Let's look at that chart again. 20 children. That's some potency. Well, he's got a big fifth house, doesn't he? Moon, Taurus, Mercury, Taurus, Venus, Taurus, Uranus, Taurus. I mean, if Taurus is fertility, this guy is he's pretty locked and loaded there. Look at that. Wow. 20 kids. Not a lot of air in that chart. It's got that Libra midheaven. Very interesting. All right. So that's Dennis Banks. Let's see who else do we have here. The great Lionel Barrymore of the Barrymore family. Born 1878. And this is, I believe, the great-grandfather of Drew Barrymore, if I'm not mistaken. Who else do we have here? Let's see. Somebody really captures the spirit of Aries. Although you can make a case, Dennis Banks, definitely. Tom Clancy. Oh, how about David Cassidy? The heartthrob, the late David Cassidy. And he's an Aries and true node in Aries. He was known for the Partridge Family. And his mother, if I'm not mistaken, was Shirley Jones in the Partridge Family. And his father was the great Jack Cassidy, the actor. And where's Saturn in the chart? Third house. Yeah, so Jack was probably like an older brother to David. Interesting chart. Definitely interesting. I think, if anything, David Cassidy was a byproduct of too much too soon. I mean, he had some talent. I mean, he could write a decent song. But I think he was a byproduct of too much too soon. And if I had to, put an angle on it, it would be Venus, Jupiter, and the moon all up in the ninth house, because Jupiter's expanding everything. And to me, that's like a kid in the candy store kind of conglomeration, stellium of planets. And what's also, we're going to get into this with Tucker tonight, not necessarily with the balsamic moon, but this whole idea of letting go, which I will show you. The moon here is definitely in a balsamic position. And one of the things that I think David Cassidy would have to deal with as he got older was his story's really inverted, right? Like you can see when he's young, he's like, kind of really nailing the 10th house. But also, like if I were to take his south node and put it right here, which is where it would be in the 4th house. So that's the family, right? And Neptune tends to be creative and artistic. So he's able to, I mean, he's got that. He's got that baked into his chart. So you can make a case that the Partridge family itself, for David Cassidy, lives in the fourth house. Just take the south node and then put it right down there, opposite sign. You could tell that he would also have drug issues as well with the Sun-Neptune opposition. So usually what happens is that people who are actors tend to have somewhat normal childhoods. And if they're not, fucked up, and then they eventually, like I was listening to Vince Vaughn's video somebody did on him. And, Vince Vaughn is like, he's not your typical Hollywood actor. He comes from the Midwest, played football and wrestling and basketball, but he also was also into musical theater. And then when he was a teenager, he started to do improv in Chicago. And so he comes from this Midwestern background, good family, not elites. And he goes to LA to make his name in the movie industry or in show business, right? And eventually he clicks with Jon Favreau, whom he had met on the set of Rudy, a movie about the football player from Notre Dame. And he's somebody, like, you can see, like, there are people in that system, believe it or not. They come in and they work their way up and eventually achieve some level of stardom. Some of them, of course, take the shortcut, if you know what I mean. David Cassidy was completely different. His trajectory was stardom young, right? Stardom young. And not only was he a TV star, but he was a recording star. And he was on the cover of like Tiger Beat magazine and 16 all the fucking time, right? And he's in LA and there's a shit ton of distractions available for young David. And he indulges. He clearly indulges. And that's also where you get into like the Sun-Neptune opposition. So he peaks early. And then his star begins to fall. And I don't think he ever really kicks the drug habit completely. And eventually he winds up in Las Vegas. And I think he had kind of a Las Vegas act. And, but clearly, he's peaking around Partridge Family days and maybe a little bit thereafter. And so what he's doing is he's really connecting in with that South Node, conjunct Neptune, right? The family. It was based on the cow cells, by the way. And he's able to ride that elevator straight up to the top of the chart. And he's creative, dude. He's a creative guy. And probably the worst thing that could have happened to him was success at an early age. All right, who else do we have? Let's see, with David Cassidy, Tom Clancy. He's a dark motherfucker. We're not going to look at him. It's an X-rated chart, or it's just an X chart. Let's see. Brooklyn Decker, Claire Danes. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Anybody interesting? Vince Gill, the guitar player. It's his birthday today. Widely recognized as a great guitar player. In fact, became a member of the Eagles for a while. All right, who else do we have? Happy birthday, David Hogg. There he is. David Hogg. I came up with a name for him, Cognitive Dissonance. April 12th. Well, that's a chart right there. He's sneaky, right? All that eighth house, Sun, Venus. I mean, to me, this is like what went down in his school, right? Like he's hanging out in some fucking closet, videotaping kids about the shooting. Like that is so Sun in the eighth house. And I went down the hog hole. That sounds terrible, doesn't it? Sounds really bad. But I did. I went down the hog hole. Some of you watched the show or listened to the show. I spent an inordinate amount of time talking about this guy, looking at Parkland. And one of the things that I know probably a lot more about David Hogg than I should. And one of the things that I'm completely and utterly convinced by, because his father was an FBI agent, and at that time he was working for one of these companies that was what? Founded in Israel. It was a crisis emergency, I swear to God, crisis emergency response cyber company. That's what his father was doing in fucking Florida. You can't make this shit up, right? And I'm 100% convinced that David Hogg is older than he says he is. Because there were pictures of David Hogg in Southern California, looked like the motherfucker was graduating. So there are rumors that he was somewhere between 19 and 20 and managed to somehow insert himself in the Marjorie Stoneham High School. And kind of late, right? And then his whole story doesn't really add up. Like he rides his bike. Well, first of all, why aren't you at school? Shouldn't you be at school? Well, here, let me ride my bike to school because I've heard there's a shooting going on there. Let me get past the cops, find my homeroom, and break out my cell phone and start interviewing people. None of it made any sense. None of it made any sense. The gal with the shaved head, I believe her name was Emma Gonzalez. That was actually his niece. And we really talked about that. Emma Gonzalez herself was probably closer to 20. Looks like she had been living in New York, studying to be an actress. Imagine that. And if you were in central casting and you wanted to get an anti-gun advocate, maybe an Aries would be a good choice or a bad choice. In this case, I think it was a bad choice because at the end of the day, didn't really work out. But I will say this about David Hogg. Didn't they put him in charge of the Democratic Party or something for a minute? Like he had a really high position in the Democratic Party. And he basically said, hey, look, we got to change the party. We got young guys that just want to get laid and they're not in our party. Say whatever you want about David Hogg. I don't think he was wrong about that. And it was like, oh, no. You don't understand who we are. We don't want those. We don't want those people in our party. David, go back to being an anti-gun advocate. You're much better at that. Much, much better at that. So his influence on the Democratic Party waned. You're like, who is this guy? Right? I'm sorry. I mean, not sorry. But whenever you have the sun in the 8th house, I think in some ways it's much more difficult to determine who a person is with the sun in the 8th versus the sun in the 12th. You spend enough time around a person with the sun in the 12th, they'll reveal who they are. They're like peeling the layers off of an onion. Like, oh. Oh, because the position is mutable, right? It's a mutable house. So the sun undergoes what would I call it? A distillation in the 12th house. I mean, literally a distillation. But the 8th house is different. Like the 8th house is much darker. You know, it's much darker. And you get people that with the sun in the 8th house, they tend to be better at being the power behind the throne. They're very good at that. Very, very good at that. Sometimes they're really good at finance and money, but you really don't know who they are. And I think that that's an apt metaphor for David Hogg. He's got a grand trine. He's got that moon in Leo, Pluto in Sag, Venus, Mercury in Aries. And all those planets are in occulted houses too, which is really interesting. And the energy in the chart is really pointing down towards Pluto. That is a fascinating planet to have in the 4th house. I'm going with programming. I'm going with some programming here, especially with the in conjuncts with Mars, Saturn, Jupiter. Yeah, I'm going for something deep and intense. Maybe it doesn't always have to be bad. He's got that grand trine, but Pluto in the 4th is a heavy burden. Heavy burden. Okay. What else we have here? Let's see. David Hogg. Who else? John Krakauer, the guy who is the writer and the mountain climber, right? Look at that. I think I did his chart one time for Star of the Day and talked about Saturn on the midheaven and how this is the peak of the chart. And he wrote that book Into Thin Air, which was a very controversial book, and also Capricorn Rising. So yeah, makes perfect sense. All right, who else? Let's see. Anybody else interesting? Is she like an assassin? Sarah Jane? Oh, no, she's just an actress. I think it was somebody else. Ed O'Neill, Married with Children, Modern Family. Sun in the 5th house. How about that? Who else do we have? Anybody else? JP Sears. He's the internet guy, right? American YouTuber. Whatever happened to him? I mean, I'm sure he still has. He had the funniest damn videos initially. I think it takes a lot of energy, effort, and creativity to sustain yourself on the internet. Didn't he get all pumped up and get all like fucking jacked? Is he a redhead too? He's a ginger, right? He's a ginger. He's a redhead. Didn't Carrot Top do the same thing? You get all pumped up. So is it a redhead thing? These redhead guys, they want to get all jacked. He's got an interesting chart. He definitely Leo rising. He's got the hair for the Leo rising for sure. And he's got a grand trine as well. Look at that. Mercury in Aries, trine Uranus in the 4th house, trine Moon in Leo. He's creative. He's definitely creative. He's got 1 square Jupiter Saturn conjunction in Libra. Oh, interesting. Squaring Neptune. Not too bad. But mostly oppositions. This guy's driven. He's definitely driven. Pluto in the third, communication. I think he, for his time, he was a game changer in a lot of ways. Like he definitely got some run, right? Like I feel like when you watch a lot of, I don't know, IG videos or mostly IG versus TikTok, and you have two people, it's the same person, and they're talking to each other and having a conversation, but they're playing different characters. That's a JP Sears, right? He was the guy that kind of started that. And it feels like he's influenced like how people do that. That's very Aries. That's very trailblazy. Now he's got no Earth in his chart, which I thought like the midheaven, and that's it. So maybe this weightlifting thing is all about getting pumped. Well, also, I can tell you, like, if we did his progress chart, he's got his sun easily progressed into Taurus, right? Easily progressed into Taurus. So that clearly would be a lot more Earth. And yeah, a lot more Earth. And maybe a lot more Jack, too. All right. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Anybody else? Tommy Smith. Is that the sprinter? American Homicide. No. I don't want to read about it. Let's see. Oh, Tiny Tim. Tiny Tim does not strike me as an Aries. Does he? Herbert David Cowrie? Mr. Tiptoe Through the Tulips. We don't have an A rating on him, or even a B. A lot of Aries, though. He was a phenomenon. Very strange. Very, very strange. We will never see the likes of Tiny Tim again. All right. Here we go. There's some April 12th birthdays for you. All right, why don't we take a quick peek at the sky, and then we'll jump into some Tucker. Let's do that. Okay, we got April 12th, 2026. We're going to go 8:04 p.m. Let's just do this, 8 o'clock. All right. We'll throw in our little goodies. Okay. Let's bring out the chart of the moment. Put it on display. All right. And let's make it bigger for everybody. Oop. A little zoomy. Okay, so there we go. Yes, the aforementioned Mars and Aries, right there. So we have a Mars Neptune conjunction. Wow. Yeah. Mars Neptune conjunction. Interesting. Mars Neptune conjunction isn't uncommon, although in charts I think it's pretty uncommon. Maybe I can think of I don't know, a couple charts that I've read where people have a Mars-Neptune conjunction. So it can be either really creative or very self-destructive. One of the two. And sometimes both. Right? Because Neptune dissolves. That's the nature of Neptune. And so right now, Mars is kind of behind a bit of a firewall in some ways. I think it's really interesting that all this drama is around the Straits of Hormuz. When I think of the word Hormuz, I have kind of interesting associations, right? It's kind of like whore and then muse. You know, it's kind of, it'd be like somebody who's like a streetwalker, you know, a woman of the lady of the night, but at the same time has kind of an interesting, magical and kind of creative spark about her, right? When I hear Hormuz, that's where my mind goes. It's like a dirty muse, really. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Kind of like Christy Noem's husband's OnlyFans Hormuz. Kind of like that. How fucking weird is that? Like, it's really fucking weird. This guy is father, 3 kids. What's his name? Brett Noem. Father, 3 kids. And he gets outed. Why? I had heard that Kristi Noem was not down with putting troops on the ground, boots on the ground. That's what I had heard. That's what I had heard. All of a sudden, yeah, I think we should find another position for her. I think we ought to do that. Oh, and can you leak this stuff about her husband? It'll make it a lot easier. That's some shit. You know, but I was thinking that, you know, you could tell we're headed into this weird Uranus and Gemini period. You know, every time you get to like, we're at the 29th degree of Uranus and Taurus, you can already feel Uranus and Gemini coming on, right? You can already feel it. You know, you've got the 2 Jeffrey Epsteins. Palm Beach Pete, who failed the lie detector test, by the way. There's something weird going on with Palm Beach Pete and Jeffrey. Am I right? Come on. He may be trolling all of us, but it's weird. And that's some Uranus and Gemini shit. And so is this Brett Noem, who has these gigantic fake boobies and helped pay for the augmentation of this woman who's a double F and sends her $2,500 a month so she can pay her rent, buy groceries, and also humiliate him. Like, even that is Uranus and Gemini, right? Because he wants to be her. You know, he's got pictures of his fake knockers, and he's paying for this woman to get her big fake knockers bigger, and then talk dirty to him, be abusive. Like, that's some Uranus and Gemini shit right there. And what's interesting is Kristi Noem is a Sag, so she's on the opposite side. I forget what her birthday is. But all you Sages, watch out. You got some shit coming. You got some shit coming. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. No, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. But you can see what I'm talking about. Like this weird mirroring that's going on. It's very strange. All right, let's get back over here, though. Right now, the streets, I got taken off. I started talking about whores and muses. You can tell. Here, let's just go with this group, right? We're just going to talk about these 3 planets. We'll leave the sun out of it. We'll talk about the sun in Chiron in just a minute. But Saturn, okay, so we all agree that Neptune represents Pisces, water, right? This was yesterday. Well, here, hold on. I got to fix this. My bad. Give me 1 second. Hold on. It's not going to be that far off. Yeah. Yeah, it's the same thing. It's just the chart flipped. I didn't know. That doesn't look like today. Here, we'll share this instead. Okay, so that's really where we are. But it's still Saturn, Neptune. Oh, there's Mars. Okay, so Mars is up a degree. But this would definitely be the blockage, right? So remember, Neptune is water, even though it's in Aries, a highly contested area of the world, and Saturn is the blockage. And here comes Mars, right? What do you think is going to happen when Saturn conjunction crosses Mars? I don't think it's going to result in a peaceful resolution. Now, I have thoughts about what's going on there. It's layered. It's layered. I think ultimately what's taking place is taking place to usher in the Great Reset and to tarnish not just America in the past, now, but America's legacy. America's legacy is on the line. And, you know, all empires fall, apparently. And they fall, you know, did you guys see Candace Owens the other day? Friday, I think it was Friday. I mean, that's what her tirade wasn't a tirade. It was a very well thought out and highly articulated critique of Donald Trump, his current administration, the fall of empire, and allusions to Rome, gladiator, and slaves. Oh my God. I don't know if Candace wrote that shit. She might have a writer working for her. I don't know. Whoever wrote it was bang on. Bang on. And she used the end of Rome as an analogy. And when we look at Aries, you know, Aries is a sign that is associated with Rome, Mars. You know, the temple of Mars, the god of war. Rome, theoretically, whatever Rome was, right, was about conquest. It was about conquest and the expansion of empire. And again, from some of the history we've been taught, which may not be the entirety of the history, but the history we've been taught, as far north as England and Hadrian's Wall, to Egypt and the pyramids, Byzantium, and just about everything else in between, all belonged to Rome at one point, right? So it was an empire that was built on expansion. And of course, the United States has been dubbed the New Rome for a very long time. And one could make a case that the month of Aries is very much related to Rome and Mars. And even this idea of they're having a MMA at the White House, right? Like, how much more Roman does it get? That's going to be on June 14th. Freedom 250. Marking the first professional MMA event at the presidential residence. June 14th, Flag Day. Oh, guess what? Trump's birthday as well. That's his birthday party. UFC Freedom 250. That's about as Rome as it fucking gets, right? It's going to be a 6-foot custom designed wire mesh octagon will be constructed on the south lawn. Due to space constraints, attendance is expected to be limited. 3 to 4. How many people are going to make this connection to this being Rome? And sort of the gladiatorial games, right? My God. There it is right there. June 14th, Flag Day. Well, Trump is, he's got a sense of the moment, doesn't he? And we don't want that. Let's see, what do we want? We don't want that. Here, I think it's back here, right? Well, where's our, oh, here it is right here. All right. So I don't get great vibes with this because once Mars pushes past Neptune, like I see Neptune here as being very deceptive. Very, very deceptive. Like, to me, this sounds and looks like a ceasefire. It's not. There are war plans being made behind Neptune. This is completely disingenuous. Completely disingenuous. And when Mars conjuncts Saturn, that's when things get very, very, very intense. We'll take a look at that in a second here. Let me give you a day. No, that's not it. Here we go. All right. So now this is, keep in mind, this is the first Mars-Neptune conjunction in Aries in this Neptune cycle. So Neptune will be in Aries for 15 years. And Mars will return every 2 years in that sign. So the next time we'll see Mars will be in this position will be in 2028, right? And then the last, I wouldn't say the last, but perhaps maybe the most meaningful Mars cycle with Neptune will be in 2030. Of course, 2030 aligns with Agenda 2030. But this is the first one. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes down, right? Now, the Mars-Saturn conjunction, for exactitude, is going to be 420. Wouldn't you fucking know? 420. And we are in the days of Molech. Holy shit. 8 days. I don't think that's insignificant transit, given sort of the dark season or the dark time of the season. How all, like, if we were to go into 418, 419, 420, those are really, really heavy days. And we know off the top of our head, right? Some of those, Columbine. Again, it's all in that kind of 3-day period. Oklahoma City bombing, David Koresh, and the incineration of the Branch Davidians. All three of those events, just those three alone, right there, between 418 and 420. And we've got a Mars-Saturn conjunction leading up to it and all the way conjunct into it. And that's going to be Mars at 754 Aries and Saturn right around 752 Aries. Wow. That is something. That is really something. Let me see something here. What do we got? Hold on. Okay, so that's going to be 754. So we'll call that 8. 8 Aries. Interesting. Very interesting. For some reason, this reminds me of Melania Trump. I'm looking at the Sabian symbol for 8 Aries. A large woman's hat with streamers blown by an east wind. I don't know. I get Melania Trump energy around this. Just by the symbol alone. A large woman's hat. She's large with streamers blown by an east wind. Interesting. Protection and spiritual guidance in the development of consciousness. Well, I sure as hell hope we get some protection, because I see that as being a very heavy duty placement. Like the burden of responsibility to engage with force. Yeah, I mean, when I think of Mars Saturn conjunctions, I just think of like this grind. I hear like the squeaky tracks of tanks. That's what it feels like to me. Those tracks that they have, tanks running these tracks, and they've got that, the squeaky sound. That feels like Mars and Aries to me, because Mars and Aries isn't speed, but it's power. And I think of tanks as being like these they're kind of symbolic of power. They're sitting ducks, sitting targets now. You're not going to win a lot of wars by using tank technology. Let's put it that way. But it feels very tank-like. And it also feels like once the fuse is lit, like you can't go back. And then Mars moves ahead of Saturn. And now Mars is taking place. So something here, there's something going on. Like there's planning. This is deception. Neptune is deception. And I think we're about 8 days out from a big go order. Would that be boots on the ground? It's quite possible. In Aries, of course. Very possible. You know, the opinions, I think, are probably going to be fairly mixed inside of chat and people that watch this show. There are some people who are Americans tried and true. And that's fine, right? You know, God bless America. We can at times be the greatest country in the world. You know, we're good, decent people. You know, whenever a tragedy used to strike in the world and the Red Cross would hit people up for money, Americans would always come through. And we give, right? We give. When we had the flood here in Texas, I saw so many people come from all over, not just the state of Texas, but places like Louisiana and Oklahoma, even Arkansas. And they were all here to help. And most of them, you know, were not paid. They were here because they understood that therefore the grace of God go I. And they jumped in. Gary Sinise, the actor, got involved, and his foundation was extremely generous and helped out a lot of local charities and did some other stuff. And for me, that's always like part of the American story, is how when there is, it's very Cancerian, you know, how when there is something that's tragic and it almost feels like it's a member of our family, that we are obliged to help. And we do that. And we do that without any times form of compensation or remuneration. It's just the way it is. And it would have been that way with Katrina. Had Bush allowed the people to go into New Orleans and actually help, instead of cock block the whole thing because they basically engineered it and they didn't want anybody to go in there and find out what they actually did. That's a story for another day. That's who we are, right? I mean, I feel like, you know, there's the American people, and then there's this thing, the government, which I believe, and I've been talking about this for a while, has been taken over. Now, you could go back to 1963, 11/22/1963, and you could say, well, that was the first coup of the American government. It was taken over by the CIA. I wouldn't have a problem with that. But I'm not sure that's who's running the country now. And I think most people, if you were to ask them, it'd be a really interesting poll. Like, out on the streets, do you think Israel is in charge of the United States? I wonder what the percentage of people. I bet you would be somewhere around 30%. Which, if you were to ask that question 5 years ago, that wouldn't be that close. You might get 5%. I bet you get about 30% now. So we're dealing with a government that's been captured. And I would say that, unfortunately, that's the case for most governments and most people. I don't know if too many governments are representative governments in this realm. Some are better than others. Most are bad. So, but I mean, just the spirit of Americans, I think, is good, right? But we've also been really game played, and we have been socially engineered, and we've been socially engineered in, I think, a most grievous way. And we've basically been socially engineered to be suspicious of and hate our neighbors. And a lot of that has happened through the political realm, divide and conquer. And it's never has been as bad as it was once Obama got elected. And the 8 years and the 2 other years after Obama, where he left the leave behind crew at the White House to fuck with Trump, like those 10 years were really rough and did irreparable damage to the country. We're still recovering from it. And what's unfortunate is that when Donald Trump was elected in 2024, he had one of the most diverse coalitions any president had ever put together. You had Black Americans, lots of Black males who were like, I'm voting for him, right? Because, he'd been harassed by the courts, right? He'd been shot at. So they could relate. They can relate. He has some skin in the game. The Latino community. You think they're really into a bunch of people coming across the border and taking their jobs? Hell the fuck no. They're not. Especially if they're coming from Venezuela or El Salvador or some other place, right? They're not even Mexican. They're not even from Michoacan or Jalisco or wherever they're from, right? They're from a completely different fucking country. So they weren't really happy. You think they were singing the praises of open borders? No. It's like, we're here, motherfuckers. Don't take our shit. So that was a group, and they tend to be very conservative. They tend to be Catholic, and, they were voting for Trump. Women started to vote for Trump. The one demographic that was dead set against him. You had the youth, like, Gen Z is like, oh yeah, he's based, man. Nick Fuentes likes him. And Nick did like him. He stopped liking him, but he did like him at one point. And then of course there were all these people who were just sick and tired of the Democratic bullshit. Of course, that's socially engineered as well. So you can make a choice. So it's, like, do you really have a choice? But what I'm saying is he had the greatest coalition of any modern president, and even past president, because there were presidents historically who presided over America, and America was not that diverse. You had a small liberal class, mostly in the Northeast. You had a small minority group, and then you had mostly working class and middle class whites for a very long time. Very, very long time. Those demographics don't really begin to change until Bush won. But by that time, like, there was a lot of migration that had happened. Reagan passed wasn't the Dream Act, but basically, if you were here, you got amnesty, right? It was like huge, really huge. And then you had the migration, or not even the migration, but the infiltration of the 60s radicals like Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dorn and a lot of these other hippie radicals of the 60s moving into college campuses and starting to teach. And what were they teaching? They were teaching social Marxism, right? So now all of a sudden, the colleges start to churn out a very different kind of student. And they play a huge role in an apportioning of the demographic. They're going to be much more radical, much more radically liberal. And now we're getting into, the binary, non-binary world, right? And then this whole idea of sort of the Jamestown Project being reborn through Black Lives Matter and sort of reigniting the race. I mean, it became very segmented and very, very demographied. So Trump had done something no other president had ever done, because these demographics really hadn't existed prior to. I mean, that's how powerful he came in with a greater mandate power than just about any other president. But he also took on way more political debt than he did in 2016. And I think it's unfortunate because there was a huge amount of people that were really behind him. They were really, I mean, how many times do you see a guy who not only loses his second presidential term, but goes through any number of court cases and has his name dragged through the mud, and he gets reelected? Like, it's never really, I don't think it's ever happened before, period, end of story. And again, you had a senile, clone at best most of the time. And then you had, the wine bomb as the vice president. And, it was pretty easy. It was kind of like setting Barack Obama up against John McCain. Set him up, knock him down. But what I'm getting at here, right? This is what I'm getting at, is that most Americans at this point, you can love the country and find something to love about it, because you're going to need to find something to love about it. Because right now, in the eyes of the rest of the world, we are reviled. We are reviled. And Donald Trump is very close to becoming a historical figure in a Napoleonic, and I use this word in just a, how do I say, descriptive sense, not in like who he is, but when you start to talk about like tyrants and emperors, Napoleon comes to mind, Hitler, of course, comes to mind. And does Trump want to see his legacy as being this Napoleonic, Caesar-like, Hitlerian character, the man who was responsible for bringing America down? Does he really, is he okay with that kind of infamy? We're going to look at his chart again tonight, and we're going to do a deeper dive into that question, because he's really teetering on the edge. And I know that there are competing narratives. People send me stuff all the time that there's, all of this secret stuff going on in the background, and none of us really know. And everybody's a panicking, and it's all just smoking out the pretenders. right? And there's all a master plan behind it. I don't really think it goes down like that. I think Trump has amazing improvisational abilities. You can see it in his chart. He can make it up as he goes sometimes, and a lot of times he'll hit a bullseye. He will. But when things start to go out of control, when you have too many political promises to fulfill, it becomes a liability. So we're coming up on that moment. And, I know that some of you who follow this is all Mars and Aries talk, right? The last time so we had Mars and Aries in 2020 during fucking COVID. Okay. And that's when I went through its retrograde phase. Entire year, Mars and Aries. The COVID year. It was also the George Floyd year. We went through it again in 2022. And guess what happens in 2022? Of course, we can only do COVID for so long, and it's take our pain off to Ukraine, right? And that's the next operation. Everything's Ukraine, 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 and bad Russia, bad Russia, bad Russia, bad Russia. And we're off of that one, aren't we? Feels that way. But it seems like every time Mars and Aries comes around, there's an explosive, at least recently, at least over the last 2 Mars cycles, heavy. And they just basically said, come December, everybody who's draft eligible will be basically drafted. I mean, that is going to happen in December. So that when they run out of boots and they have to replenish the troops, they've got the mechanism all set in place. Now, if we agree that perhaps a third party is actually in charge of our government, which I believe that to be true, who do you think is running the draft? Who do you think is putting all this together? Who do you think would love to see the slaughter of American young men and women? They're doing the same thing in Europe, by the way. Do you know who's not going to fight in Europe? The migrants. So while Uli and France are off to fight the Russians for the third fucking time, their girlfriends will be left at home with the migrants. How's that? And who do you think is masterminding all of this? Which third party has gotten involved in their governments? Is it the same one? A lot of people keep pointing their fingers at London. I have no doubt that the City of London, MI6, the Crown, their hands are dirty. No doubt. But we're dealing with a situation where it's going to get kinetic. To me, this Mars-Saturn conjunction that's the go order. Go. And everything is being prepared right now with Mars behind Neptune. Neptune is like the fog, right? The fog of war. And I'll tell you right now, if this happens, expect big casualties. Why? Why do you say that, Robert? It's because Mars is going to conjunct Chiron in Aries. And by that time, Jupiter will probably be around 19 degrees. And it will still be in square with Chiron. and Mars will be there. Jupiter makes things bigger, right? The numbers get bigger with Jupiter. And I think so far they've been able to, I think massage the numbers for now. I'm not sure they're going to be able to do that. I mean, the other thing too with this Mars Saturn conjunction is usually they need some kind of an event to really kickstart a war. Hello, 9/11. I wouldn't put it past them with this Mars Neptune conjunction in Aries. Keep your eye on that moon, right? When it goes balsamic in Aries. There's something I was going to say. What was it? Oh, yeah. Okay. So check this out. I was reading that there are in the ranks of the current military, and this is another Mars Neptune conjunction aspect, in the ranks of the current military, they are starting to see waves of conscientious objectors. That is a Mars Neptune conjunction right there. That's happening. There are soldiers who are getting ready to tap out. They don't want to go fight in this war. It's really interesting when you go back and look at like the Vietnam War and who fought in the Vietnam War. A lot of these guys that fought in the Vietnam War fought because they had military in their background, in their blood, right? And they had been kind of raised on America, being this force for good, right? Like they were kind of raised on it, even though, they were still, this flower power generation. A lot of those guys were not flower power guys. They were on campuses. They were protesting. The guys that fought in the Vietnam War were working class, mostly grunts. Go watch the movie The Deer Hunter. I'll give you a good understanding of it. Black Americans from inner cities. These were not college educated for the most part Americans, right? I think you had deferment fear in college. So it was a very different kind of soldier that fought in that war. Some of them wanted to be there. Some of them enlisted. Some of them went back for another term, even after they only had to do one. But this is going to be very different. These are not those guys. They did not grow up watching Audie Murphy and John Wayne. So I don't know who they're going to try to get to fight these wars. I mean, they're definitely going to try to bring the draft in. I mean, that's already on the books. Everybody's automatically drafted. Have you been noticing that there's been more fires lately? Keep your eye on fires with Aries season. We just had a fire at a Kimberly-Clark plant. You know what they make, don't you? Toilet paper. So Mars, Neptune, Aries, and that's refinery fires. And I know we've been seeing quite a few of them. I think we're going to see more. I think this month is flammable. In 3 days, Mercury goes into Aries. And Mercury will catch up with Mars. Mercury's fast. Degree per day. Mars is a degree every 2 days. Things happen fast with the Mercury-Mars conjunction. Look out. I mean, it feels like I had this thought the other day. And you would think that these times that we're in now are just really fucking nuts and crazy. I mean, we really isolated. It really is. But we're going to look back on these days with fondness. I know that sounds really strange, but we will. Now, the good news is that ultimately this thing will be resolved. Now, whether it's resolved in 6 weeks, 6 months, 3 years, that's a whole other discussion. And what it's all going to look like on the other side of that, TBD. I think ultimately it'd be a lot decentralized. Whether it's decentralized in a better way and we break up along ideological lines, maybe that's what happens. And I say we, I'm talking about the United States. Or we fall into the Curtis Yarvin model of like Rome city-states with techno lords running their little fiefdoms and the president serving at their pleasure, right? But it feels like we're headed that way. Uranus and Gemini augurs the imminent fracture and breakup of form. So we got the moon moving into Pisces. Tomorrow it'll move into Pisces. It definitely will be balsamic and feels a bit like the calm before the storm. New moon in Aries, Mercury in Aries, Mars in Aries, Neptune in Aries, Saturn in Aries, Sun in Aries, Chiron in Aries. You're definitely in the calm before the storm. But on the upside or the plus side, there's a lot of Aries energy to get shit done. So if you've got projects that you've got to deal with and you got to, getting through the sludge, once Mercury gets out of Pisces, it's like, wading through knee high sort of water at the ocean's edge, right? The tide will go out and then you'll be able to move much quicker. Things accelerate very quick. Things accelerate. So your own ability to get things done accelerates, whatever it is. Whatever it is. And I'm a big fan of normalcy. You have to kind of live in this world and kind of not of it, right? But when you're here, I think you do the best to live your life. You live your life to the fullest as much as you can. And you don't, and it's taken me almost 66 years. I'm finally starting to get to this point. Finally, where you don't want to sacrifice your time worrying about what might happen. Okay. I do feel that it is important to understand what happens or to have a sense, because you don't want to be blindsided. You just don't. Nobody wants to be blindsided. But we can't control everything. And I think one of the greatest deceptions that has been deployed upon us is this idea that the next shoe is going to drop. And we've been waiting for the next shoe to drop for quite a while now. And maybe sometimes it's dropped a little. But when we think of the next shoe to drop, it's really a significant event. Big event. And I think somewhere in the back of all of this, right, that we're all traumatized. You know, no matter how you were able to deal with or insulate yourself from 9/11, it's fucking traumatic. COVID was traumatic. I mean, you know, nobody really talks about COVID that much, but it was fucking traumatic for a lot of people. So is it you know, unfair for people to have a sense that the next shoe's going to? Well, in some ways, those are kind of the next shoes that have dropped. But did they fundamentally alter society in your ability to live? Some cases, perhaps yes. Maybe you lost your job during COVID. I'm sorry. Maybe it was for the better. Maybe it was for the worse. Maybe you're still recovering from it. I don't know. So I think having a feeling or a sense that the next shoe is about to drop is natural in a lot of ways. I'd say it's natural. But even though it's natural, it's still a deception because it traumatizes us. And it doesn't allow for us to get on with our lives and to take the most of this opportunity in the blink of an eye. It'll be over. Your life will be over in the blink of an eye. And what will you have accomplished? What will you have done? How much time will you have just put aside because, well, shit, the next shoe's about to drop, so why try anyway? It's a very, very, very deceptive program that they've inserted into us. And quite frankly, I don't blame most people. So with all this Aries energy, what are you going to do? Well, they're moving forward with their plans to disassemble the legacy of the United States and maybe move into the Great Reset and, you know, go into CBDC and get rid of money and all that shit, right? That's all on the table. It's all on the table. But you still have to live your life. And I feel like, and I've said this before, it is the best frontline defense for dealing with things that are beyond your control. Best frontline defense. You know, when I started to do astrology readings back in 2010, 2011, right? Now it was before then. It was 2000 and 2009. 2009, 2010. So 2010, I was thinking, oh, fuck, Obama's president. We're fucked. All right, this is it. This is the new world order shit. He's the perfect salesman. And when you look into his past, it's really dark. And, that was 16 years ago. 16 years ago. And was it worth it for me to do all that deep diving? Sure. Why not? I created a website. I had content. It was fine. But at the end of the day, I always felt like the end was just around the corner. And so in a lot of ways, it limited my long-term approach. And if there's one thing about Aries that Aries teaches us, it's to really be in the moment. Really be in the moment. That's what the great Jerry West talked about with playing basketball. The game is just a series of moments. And the more that you are aware and conscious of being in that moment, your chances of having the next moment unfold in a successful manner was predicated by the presence of mind you had with the previous moment and being in that moment. That's what Aries brings to us. And I feel like with all this Aries, there's a difference between being for the moment and in the moment. Right? It's very, very different. So there's a level of awareness here. Saturn, Neptune, it brings awareness. Saturn is the Lord of time. And Neptune is the Oracle of dreams, right? So there's something very, very practical about Neptune, Saturn. All right, let's get off this. As I wind that little chat down, I guess I would top it off with stay in the moment and commit to yourself, commit to your gifts, and yeah, sure, have 3 or 4 months worth of food, some water, some 2A on the side, right? Got to have that. But in the meantime, keep following your dreams. Make them practical and stay in the moment. That's what Aries will teach us, especially this version of it. Okay, let me get a little banner here. And we'll talk a little true hemp science. We should have our new nano silver promotion this week with the toothpaste plus a special goodie that goes along with the toothpaste, which I can't really talk about yet, but you'll like it. True Hemp Science is your one-stop shop for all things CBD. And you know the drill. You go there, you spend $100 or more, type in 15MINS, you get the goodie bag on top of your order. And had a great session with a client up in Oregon. It's his specialty. It's his world. If I wasn't dealing with Chris, I'd probably sit down and say, hey, man, let's work together. He's actually gotten his stuff. He's tried his stuff. He's tested his stuff, and thumbs up, right? So this is from an independent third party who is a CBD specialist, and he endorses the product. So there you go. There you go. A professional recommendation from one professional to another. All right, let's get into Tucker Carlson. You guys have waited long enough. But, we got to get into where we are, right? We got to get into where we are. That sounds like such a 60s thing to say. Man, we got to get into where we are. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, man, I feel you. I feel you. Guys with bow ties. That's where Tucker started off. Pretentious little shit. I could not stand that version of Tucker. Couldn't stand it. And he fits right in with those two other assholes. The guy on the left is Peter Hotez. He'll tell you how much vaccines are good for you. And he was one of the cheerleaders for COVID now, wasn't he? Mr. Bow Tie guy. Annoying as hell. And then you've got Bill Nye, another promoter of COVID, the science guy. I waited on Bill Nye one time when I was in Seattle. He was a jerk. I mean, here, let me rephrase it. He was arrogant. He had that vibe about him. He had a true arrogance about him. And I guess maybe that's, where you got to go if you're going to become Bill Nye the science guy. And then there's Tucker in the middle. All three of them were obnoxious twits. I did not watch a lot of political TV. But every now and then I would tune in with Tucker and catch this. I didn't really know who he was. I'm like, who is this guy? He's fucking obnoxious. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at his birth chart, and I'm going to show you what's been going on with Tucker Carlson and some really, really interesting pieces of his birth chart. Let me make sure that we'll make this bigger. Okay, so Tucker was born on the 16th of May in 1969. And he was born in San Francisco, California. His father was Richard Dick Carlson, who was originally, I believe, from either Pennsylvania or Ohio, and had been adopted. And goes into the Army, does the Army thing, comes out. I guess I think he did some kind of like information sort of documentation, like using a camera and documenting like invasions and shit like that. I feel like that's, if I go back in my brain, it feels like that's what he did. Because when he came out of the Army, he gravitated towards journalism. Now, Tucker's birth father, Dick, was an Aquarian. And he did some very Aquarian things. So when he was a young man, Dick Carlson, he and a buddy of his moved to California and were living in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is why Tucker was born in San Francisco. And at that time, he was married to Tucker was not raised by his birth mother. Eventually, Dick Carlson divorces Tucker and Tucker's brother's mother and marries an heiress to the Swanson family. So she is the woman that Tucker knows mostly as his mother. So Tucker was raised with means. He was. I don't think Tucker ever had to worry about where his next meal was coming from. It was probably in the frozen section in the grocery store. But his father is an interesting character. His father and his father's friend start to do journalism. And they wind up doing a big expose on the mayor of San Francisco, a guy by the name of Joe Alioto. And they had this story that accused Joe Alioto of corruption and ties with the mafia. And Joe Alioto was a lawyer and kind of a long-time San Francisco politico. Like, he was kind of a tough guy, right? Politically, you didn't really want to mess with Joe Alioto. And Alioto took exception to the article, and he sued Look magazine, and he won. And the settlement, and this will be interesting because this kind of gets replayed with Tucker and Dominion. It's kind of interesting, right? Now, what happens is that Tucker's dad and this other guy who write the article for Look, they are not once called to the witness stand by Alioto's lawyers or Look's lawyers. So they write the story. They never have to testify. Look loses. Joe Alioto gets, I think, $250,000, which at that time was a lot of money and basically puts Look magazine out of business. And then after that, they get a video camera and they start cruising around the Bay Area looking for news stories. And it's one of the few portable video cameras that are out there. So they're freelancing and looking for stories so they can sell to one of the three local news stations there, which would be KRON, KPIX, and whatever the ABC one was, I forgot. It's been long, but not that long. Anyway, it was those three. Plus, you had KNTV in San Jose, which was another ABC affiliate. Anyway, KGO, San Francisco. Those are the stations, and KTVU for independent. And that's what they would do. They would drive around and they would try to find these stories. And so you can see this as kind of a genetic pass down through Tucker, right? You've got the journalism side. You've got the muckraking side. You also have the TV side because of the early inception of video cameras. And then eventually Dick Carlson moves to La Jolla, which is where Tucker primarily grows up when he's not going to an academy back in, I think it was Virginia or someplace like that. And Dick Carlson he's a deep state player, right? He's a major player in the deep state. And it doesn't take that much to, I don't know, they've probably changed his Wikipedia page. But when I first started looking at Dick Carlson's life, are you kidding me? Voice of America? You're doing all this shit for Bush and Reagan? Yeah, man. You're involved in these elections overseas. You're like one of these witnesses to elections. Okay. They have those people. So Saturn in his chart is in the 10th house. The father plays a huge role, right? But what the hell is Saturn really doing? It's not really doing anything. We've got an inconjunct with Saturn and Uranus. And remember, Uranus is the ruling planet of his father's sun sign, Aquarius, right? And I see this Uranus in conjunct with Saturn in Tucker's chart personally, that Saturn is bow tie guy, Uranus is tie-dye guy. And Tucker was a tie-dye guy. Tucker and his brother used to go to Grateful Dead shows. They're big Deadheads. Like, to me, it's really one of the more interesting pieces around Tucker Carlson, that he could come through the whole Grateful Dead world and come out the other side from tie-dye to bow tie and just be an obnoxious cunt. Pro-war. He was a neocon, didn't like Ron Paul, made fun of him, basically, pissed on Ron Paul's presidential campfire, helped put it out. Ron was just on a show recently. Tucker's apologized to him. Tucker's apologized to a bunch of people. He's admitted he's been wrong, which I think is really interesting. But I feel like that's the Uranus-Saturn inconjunct, right? From tie-dye to bow tie. Another thing I've been finding interesting about his chart is that true node, 2845, let's call it 29 degrees. Have you noticed that Tucker Carlson has become decidedly more Christian? Again, astrology tells a story, and it is telling that very story. We have been witnessing the spiritual transformation of Tucker Carlson right before our very eyes. I can certainly recall a time when it's not that long ago when Tucker didn't mind a glass of bourbon and a good cigar. He's not doing that anymore. I think his only vice now is tobacco patches or tobacco, whatever, right? I think he's a nicotine guy. But he has been talking more and more about his faith in Christians than ever before. And his true node is at 29 degrees, right? It is I call this, whatever you believe about Jesus or not, right? In the story of Jesus, the 29th degree of Pisces is the degree of the crucifixion. It is the last degree of the zodiac. And then what's the next degree over? It is Aries. It is the resurrection, right? It is moving essentially from winter to spring, right? Life returns, is resurrected. So it's a double metaphor. And Tucker, with that true node, right now, with Neptune having been parked there for a long time, and last year with Saturn around his true node, 25, 26, 27, retrograde, going back, right? We have seen Tucker become very spiritual, and very spiritual in a Christian sense. And you can see it. It's right there, right? And there is something about it's really interesting. Laura Loomer has got it out for Tucker Carlson. Really got it out for Tucker Carlson. And she did apparently she's got a podcast that nobody watches, but she was on her podcast recently and says that she sends Trump all these videos, these clips of Tucker dissing him. And she had the audacity, the absolute audacity on her podcast to say, yeah, Tucker, I'm not stabbing you in the back. I'm stabbing you right in the chest, motherfucker. She said that. She said that. I'm stabbing you right in the chest, motherfucker. Who got stabbed in the chest? Yeah, Jesus, right? Spear of Longinus, rib cage, right there. That's the chest. And Laura Loomer is using the exact language of sticking a knife, very similar to a spear, in very Aries language, by the way, in Tucker's chest. It's on the internet. I'm not gonna give her a clicker review. If you have a VPN, you can use it and then smudge yourself. It's a nasty piece of work. But it feels like Tucker is now become this face of anti-Semitism, right? Like he is hated. Who do the Jews hate more? Tucker, Candace, Nick Fuentes. Who else will be on that list? I think they hate Tucker more. I think Tucker has aroused the ire of the Zionists or the pro-Israel, pro-war, Jewish intelligentsia, if you want to use that word. I think he's at the top of their list. Tucker Carlson. Megyn Kelly's now in the conversation as well, whatever. But Tucker, right? Tucker has gotten to this level of being despised as much as Jesus was back in the day in the Holy Land, wherever that was, right? Like I think we're getting kind of close here. We're getting kind of close in terms of a collective animosity towards Tucker Carlson. And it's that 29th degree. And then there's Chiron right there in Aries. I bet you that's right around the time Tucker didn't lose his mother, but I bet you it was around between 4 and 6 where the divorce happens. But I also feel like it's quite interesting in that Tucker is also kind of aggressive, right? He's kind of aggressive, but he's aggressive in a very chirotic kind of way. You know, and with Venus in Aries, he'll always talk about, oh, I don't have any hate for anybody. You know, I've been to Israel, lovely place, beautiful place. You know, some of the people there I really, really love, you know, blah, blah, blah. You know, he's always got that kind of Venus disclosure, right? The Venus terms and conditions, right? And then he comes in and basically says, these fucking people are crazy and we need a divorce and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you can see that in how he goes about his business. And it's really interesting that Mark Levin has accused Tucker Carlson as being the modern day Father Coughlin. First of all, let me say a little bit of something about Mark Levin. I don't watch Mark Levin, but I do see clips that other people play. I saw a Mark Levin clip on Tucker Carlson, and he was talking with Sean Hannity. And one of the things that I noticed about Mark Levin is that he never looks straight into the camera when he talks. He has his head down and his eyes down, and he's talking about what should happen and what they should be, what we should be doing. And he's not even looking directly into the camera. If you ever watch him, watch that, because he can't look America right in the eyes and say what he's saying, because he knows that it's a lie, right? That he's perpetuating a lie for another entity. He can't look you straight in the eye. Just watch him. But anyway, he calls him Father Coughlin. And Father Coughlin is a very interesting character. Father Coughlin was a Catholic priest who was kind of on the Henry Ford, Charles Lindbergh side of things, and had these pre-war radio broadcasts. And he wrote newsletters and sent them out to thousands of people. And he talked about the Jewish threat behind World War II. And he talked about the Bolsheviks, and he was, man, this guy was, he eventually got censored by the Vatican, but a very interesting character. And this is what Mark Levin has called Tucker Carlson, the American version of Father Coughlin. And I found that to be interesting because he didn't compare him to Henry Ford or Charles Lindbergh, but he compared him to a religious figure. I thought that's interesting because I feel like Tucker has been going through a major conversion process with Saturn and Neptune on his Jupiter, on his true node, which, by the way, is in the 9th house. And it's in Pisces, and it's also going to be philosophical. It's going to be spiritual. It's going to be esoteric to some degree, although I don't think Tucker really fancies himself as a follower of the esoteric traditions, particularly with his latest round of guests, including a Catholic priest who's an exorcist. But there's something going on with Tucker that's very significant with Saturn and Neptune. His true node has been activated. It was activated at least 18 months ago, right, when his nodal return. And it'll be very interesting to see where Saturn takes him. Right now, it's on Chiron. I think Tucker should be very mindful of, like, I think he's protected, but I think he should be very mindful of traveling. Very, very mindful of traveling. In fact, if I were Tucker Carlson, I would not step out of the United States. Because even when Saturn goes past Chiron, it stops just right before Venus at 14 degrees, retrogrades, goes back to 7, puts it right there, and then moves forward again. Now, the Saturn transit of the 10th house is significant. Really, really significant. You haven't seen anything yet with Tucker. Now, he's not going to run for president. Like, that's not, I just don't think he's wired that way. But it's going to be very interesting especially in terms of professional relationships. And they're going to be relationships that he's going to have to re-examine. And there could be some possibilities for some very interesting new relationships, but some of his professional relationships will not last through that Saturn transit in his 10th house. And then he's coming up on his second Saturn return, which will happen in 2030. I'd probably be more interested in Chiron conjuncting the Saturn. So that's happening. And he's going to have Chiron close to conjuncting the Saturn and Saturn conjuncting his Chiron. This is going to test Tucker Carlson's bravery and his ability to, he may take some body shots here pretty soon. He may take some body. I would not be surprised if his compound gets raided or he gets arrested at some point. I would not be surprised with the Saturn Chiron conjunction and Chiron on Saturn, right? It is the crisis of order, the crisis of stability. And I know he's talked about it a little bit, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happens. And I would say sooner rather than later. But what I really wanted to touch on with this chart, and believe me, I wanted to talk about this true node and the conjunction with Saturn, Neptune, and what I would call the spiritualization of Tucker Carlson. I mean, the guy that you see now and the guy that you saw at Fox, it's not the same. When I say this, I'm not saying he's a clone. He's not the same guy. He doesn't have the same values. He doesn't speak as openly about faith. And there are times when he is spitting the truth. Like, I'm not really crazy about what he did with Nick Fuentes, but at least he had him on the show. And I don't like what he did afterwards. He kind of sideways badmouthed Nick Fuentes, even after he had him on the show. So I think Tucker still has a little ways to go. Just one man's opinion. But there are times where he feels very connected and very clear and very dialed in. Like, he's got the spirit speaking through him. I can tell you that. And it's been this Saturn-Neptune ignition of his purpose. And for a long time, he probably thought it was political. He probably thought it was media related. That's not what Tucker Carlson is here to do. Tucker Carlson is here, for lack of a better term, to be a spiritual healer. Yeah. He is talking about Israel in a way that, look, Dan Bilzerian's got balls of steel, and he'll take it, right? He'll take it to the wall. But he doesn't have the same historical context and the ability to articulate like Tucker Carlson does. So he is like out in front with this. It just to me, this feels like really, really resurrection-y. It's so wild, right? Like that true node at 29, Pisces, Chiron in Aries, wounded. But guess what? What is Chiron doing? Chiron's in trine with Neptune. And so what Tucker is demonstrating by talking about things that are uncomfortable, he's helping to heal the parts in people that have always thought something, couldn't really articulate it, maybe were scared of he's doing something similar to what Trump did in 2016, when all of a sudden Trump started to say things that people were like, of course, that makes total sense. And he said things that other people always thought, but were afraid to say. And that's what made 2016 Trump so great. He didn't say them for political effect. He said them because, he was moved, right? But that was not spiritual. I would say that would be more sort of psychological, sociological. This is different. This is very, very different. And is he the most effective spokesperson for exposing Benjamin Netanyahu and the corruption of our government? He's the best we got, besides Candace, who is a Taurus as well, by the way. And he's not perfect, but, people say, I don't know what happened to him. I used to really like him. Well, what happened is that he's challenging your biases. He's challenging what you believe in as the status quo. And in that regard, and I know that this is a funny term to use, and again, I know he's not perfect. Like, there's all kinds of deep statey stuff around him. I'm reading the chart, right? I'm reading the chart. And Tucker's role is to find courage in this lifetime. That's Chiron and Aries. And then to have the courage of that conviction and to literally die for that conviction if he has to. And I think he has come to that place. And that is spiritual healing for people. That's spiritually healing for people. With that Chiron trying to Neptune. It's like, wow, look at this guy. He's laying it all out there. And in some ways, it gives people permission to have their own experience around it. And he's got Mars and Sag too. I mean, what's interesting about Tucker's chart is he has a lot of retrograde. He's got Pluto retrograde, Jupiter retrograde, Mars retrograde, Neptune retrograde. That's a lot of retrograde. And when you look at the arc of his life, right, in some ways, he's kind of like a version of David Cassidy, but different, right? David Cassidy skyrockets to the top of his chart. And then, after the Partridge Family, it is a slow and steady decline and burning up in the Earth's atmosphere, right? And that, dies fairly young, doesn't meet a very, tried to reinvent himself, became a magician, and could never really capture the spark of his youth. Tucker's interesting because he kind of starts off like that. Like, he gets out of college, he's got the connections, like he's a Nepo kid. Let's be honest, okay? He's a Nepo kid. And he gets in and he, gets this job. It was at CNN or CNBC, I think. And, eventually gets fired. He's like fucking Republican in the worst sense of the term, kind of a neocon bitch. But then with all this retrograde, right? Mars, Neptune, Pluto, Jupiter, all this retrograde, he has to reverse everything. He has to reverse engineer everything. He's got Juno retrograde. He's got Pallas retrograde. And he's got a lot retrograde. The only thing that does have retrograde is Venus and Mercury, everything, and Uranus. Everything else is, well, Chiron's not retrograde, but in Saturn. But he's got a lot of retrograde. So he had to deconstruct, right? He had to deconstruct his belief systems. And I think that's what happens when you have a lot of retrograde in your chart. You have to kind of go back and sort of, revisit, reassemble. There's a lot of like potential for, kind of reversing your course and looking at it and going, you know what? Maybe I need to like stop believing this or stop eating this or stop taking this, right? You get all that retrograde, it forces you to reevaluate. And ultimately, and I would say in Tucker's case, this would be unlearning his enculturation. Let's talk about Uranus. This is really what I wanted to talk about tonight. The radicalization of Tucker Carlson has occurred over the last 2 years. And it's Uranus conjuncting his sun. Right there. And what has it been doing? It's been trining Jupiter, trining his south node, trining Pluto, and he's getting ready to go into a Uranus trine. That's some. First of all, the Uranus Sun conjunction. He's got Sun in Taurus, right? So he's fixed. He's very, very fixed. And his Sun is conjunct Algol. And I feel like the bow tie is such a great symbol for Algol. Isn't it? Right? Like, it's an even better symbol than the regular tie in some ways. Because at least with the regular tie, you can kind of unloosen it, and it could still be around your neck. But the bow tie is either on or off pretty much, right? Either unhook it, you unloosen a bow tie, may as well take it off. So for me, the bow tie is very symbolic of Algol. And what Uranus has done is it's broken through Tucker's social engineering, and it's helped him find a different voice, right? Not the voice that he inherited, not the voice of the establishment that Dick Carlson brought into Tucker's life, and the whole path that was laid out before him. Tucker was a Bush guy. Tucker was a Reagan guy. He thought somebody like Pat Buchanan was dangerous, and Ron Paul was silly and foolish. That's fixed. It's like, and he talks about it pretty openly now. And maybe it was him aligning himself with the establishment that allowed him to talk through Algol. But it's also a lot like the dichotomy of the bow tie and the tie-dye, right? Like from the neck down, Tucker is tie-dye. And from the neck up, he's bow tie. And that's very much Algol too. And the whole idea with Algol is for the head and the body to act as one. When you drink too much alcohol, you lose your head. So what Uranus has done is it's radicalized Tucker. And then we just go across the chart right there. Boom. Sextiling his true node. Where's Saturn? It's got a Saturn-Uranus sextile happening for a long time. And that is where you take radical and times avant-garde or difficult concepts, and then what you do is you make them palatable and understandable to the most possible people with Saturn. And Tucker has, I think, an amazing capacity to do that. He can be a little highbrow, but he can also speak to the common man. And now, whether you think it's a getup or not, he's up in his cabin and he's got his checkered shirts, and studio looks a little like Cracker Barrel, whatever. I don't pass judgment on it. I enjoy interviews. I think what you're seeing is real. Now, is it the complete story? Do we know everything? I wouldn't go that far. But the Uranian conjunction with his sun and breaking through Algol and finding a new voice. And boy, does he have a fucking voice now. Right? It's sort of like once he left Fox, he, even now, like when he was on Fox, he wore a tie. He didn't wear a bow tie, but he wore a tie. Now he doesn't wear a tie. See, all that is very symbolic, isn't it? From bow tie to necktie to no tie. And now his tongue is untied. And now Uranus is on his moon. And he's got Moon in Taurus born on a new moon. So he's going to fill his life with experience. It's the nature of the new moon. And I really feel like this has been his call to action. This has been Tucker's call to action. The radicalization, and even the shift from Fox to the internet and YouTube, right? Going from the broadcast medium, which is a very 11th house medium, by the way, to a different platform, and probably a much more contemporary one that reaches more people. And within 2 years, Tucker's going to have Uranus on his natal Mercury. And that'll be a very, very interesting transit for Mr. Carlson. Maybe the missing pieces all come together. He's got that Mercury Vesta conjunction. And it feels to me like people that have Mercury Vesta conjunctions have a lot of inherent wisdom. Like they're born with wisdom, even with Mercury and Gemini, right? Mercury and Gemini is more like the transport. It's more like the transmission. But Vesta being the oldest of the asteroids, it's been around a while. So we're witnessing something really, really interesting with Tucker Carlson. And I believe that what you're seeing is what you're getting astrologically. Now, we all know that Tucker got fired from Fox. And I want to show you what was happening then. It's really interesting. Really, really interesting. Okay, so first of all, you knew it was coming. right? You could see it coming a mile away. You knew it was coming. And you didn't know the details of it, right? But I remember clearly saying before anybody else said this, you can go back and check my Twitter feed. I said, one of the contingencies in the suit that Dominion won against Fox was that Tucker Carlson would lose his job. And I knew I had no paper trail. I just knew it because the Dominion verdict comes through. Fox has got to pay them all this money. And within a couple of days after that, Tucker Carlson is out. I'm like, they wanted his ass out. And that's exactly what happened. Exactly what happened. So this is he was fired on April 24th of 2023. Let's break this down a little bit. First thing you see is Mars in the 12th house. And what do we know about Mars in the 12th house? This is the transit of the day. Hidden enemies. Hello. Sometimes astrology actually adds up. Hidden enemies. That's number one. Right? We have an inconjunct with his Mars, which is interesting. We got a yod going on, but let's talk about this part of the yod with Mars to Mars. It's like, yeah, like Tucker, because you spoke out against Minion and was on the questioning side of things. Yeah, that Mars in the 12th house, you had somebody that wanted you out the door. Now, Tucker had been in the midst of morphine during this time. Like you could see where Neptune was. It was already starting to cook his true note a little bit, right? We're going to get more into Neptune in a second. Very big transit here, which we'll break this down. But what I find really fascinating about this day is like, look where Juno is. It's right on his sun. And you know what that means? It means this is a new opportunity. This is a completely new opportunity for Tucker Carlson. So even though he was getting the axe on this day, Juno was conjunct to Sun. Brand new start. They did him a favor. They totally did him a favor. And perhaps with Pallas transiting his ascendant, Tucker knew where his path was taking him. Intuitively, instinctually, right? He's like, all right, let's go. Let's get on to the next phase. Now, I do want to talk about Neptune in a different light because Tucker, was going through the Neptune-Pluto opposition. Yep, that's right. And that had been brewing for at least a year. And you guys have heard me talk about the Neptune-Pluto opposition. And it happens to everybody around 53. And so for Tucker, what was he, 54, 53, 54? It's right around there. Late degree Pluto, right? And when you get into the Neptune-Pluto opposition, you have to let go of something that is really important to you. It's like a death. And Tucker had put a lot of time in at Fox. He was the most watched show on television. Yeah, let me repeat that. The most watched show on television, not just on Fox, but on television. And if you were Laura Ingraham, you counted your lucky stars, right? Was she after Tucker or before Tucker? Who came after Tucker? Hannity? I forget. But if you were Laura Ingraham, because I know she butted up against Tucker with her pro, you were like thankful because the viewership either before or after was there. Can't stand Sean Hannity. He's a traitor. Anyway, Neptune is right there. It's on his true node. It's like your path is going to move away from where you've been, right? Like it's also opposing the south node. And Neptune is like, okay, opposing Jupiter. Are you going to lose all that money as well? Tucker doesn't have to worry about that. But, I mean, most people think about having an income and being compensated for their income. And in his case, I guess, so he can pay people to, produce his show and all that other stuff. But he was going through it, right? I mean, that was when he had to say goodbye to the thing that he felt like he couldn't let go of. That is the test. That is the absolute freaking test. But, what do we know about that? Well, guess what? There's always the Neptune trine that goes along with the Neptune-Pluto opposition. So the whole idea, right, 52, 53, 54, depending upon where your Pluto is, right? This is the silver cord, right? Pulls and attaches us to life. This is a dress rehearsal for death. And when you let go, you just move into the Neptune trine. And it's like falling into the arms of God. Like, oh. All I had to do was just let go of this situation that really wasn't working for me. And off I go. Off I go, and I'm being gently and gracefully guided to wherever it is my higher self and my soul needs to take me. But it's a crucial transit, and he's going through it when he's getting booted out of Fox. Those are huge stakes. Now, again, luckily, I'm sure he felt betrayed. Look, Chiron was on his Venus. I'm sure he felt very, very betrayed. But he also had Jupiter going through his 10th house. So it didn't take him long to rally back. And of course, I said he's going to start to broadcast on Twitter. Watch this. And it's exactly what he did. He started broadcasting on Twitter. And eventually he, gets his feet into his own platform and YouTube. And he's maybe bigger than he ever was in some ways. Certainly, he's got a more profound or spiritual. Now, let me just say this. I want to be clear about something with Tucker. Do I trust him implicitly? No, I don't. But I don't trust anybody implicitly in that world. And one of the things that I've heard him talk about, and I have to preface this in a way that doesn't deconstruct what I've been talking about for the last hour and a half or so with this chart. but he talks a lot about regionalism. If you listen to some of his solutions, right, like he talks about, and I think regionalism is probably not a bad thing. But I just wonder if he is a different stripe of a version of the New World Order. And it's just a small percentage. There's a bit of the communitarian in Tucker. I've noticed that. But aside from that, I can tell you what the astrology is and has been doing. Like, look at the true node. When he got canned, the true node was right on Saturn. The sun was on Saturn. Right? This is a new opportunity for him. Completely new opportunity. And I think the hardest aspect here would be that Neptune-Pluto opposition, and not just Neptune-Pluto, but Jupiter and Uranus, and really pulling. And he's got Saturn going through his 8th house. And he's about ready for Saturn to exit his 8th house. See it right there? That's death, right? He's been prepared for this. Really interesting. I don't know. I think it's interesting. When you add all these pieces together, you get that Juno right on the sun, brand new, right? Sun, Vesta, true node on Saturn in the 10th. Boom, Jupiter's going through his 10th, so that's opportunity. Pallas is ascendant, so yeah, he knows where things are going, has a sense, and then gracefully, pushes off from the shore, right? Starts heading downstream with the Neptune trine. I think it's super interesting. I think Mars is also part of the Yod, right? Where's Uranus? Uranus and Mars. Where's Uranus? 26. So it was 1 degree off of his sun. And that again, you can see it, right? Like that radicalization had been happening for a while. I really feel like COVID was the turning point for Tucker, because he had that was the Mark guy on there, the doctor, the Jewish doctor, who was ridiculous, and he was, and Tucker was kind of, like buying the party line, and then eventually, I think he saw through Fauci, and he started to see through COVID. And of course, with Fox and all of their contracts with the pharmaceutical companies, I mean, Tucker had to watch his P's and Q's. They want to lose those sponsorships. But I would say that COVID was the beginning of the radicalization of Tucker. 2022, Uranus approaching his sun. So he's been transformed, right, by these Uranian energies for going on the last 2 to 3 years. So I would say the whole thing started very, maybe about a year after COVID, and really picked up steam. Fascinating stuff. I mean, I look at this chart and it's like, of course, Mars in 12th house, the enemy, right? The hidden enemy, the new opportunity with Juno on the sun, Chiron on Venus, right? Betrayal, but also opportunity as well, new partnerships, the Saturn opposition with Pluto and Uranus and the South Node and Jupiter, preparing him to go through this spiritualization of his true node at the 29th degree and the ending of Saturn going through the underworld. You know, Saturn, it's really interesting. His 8th house coincides with Saturn going into Aquarius for COVID, because Saturn was in Aquarius during COVID, right? And that whole 3-year period, he had Saturn going through his 8th house. And towards the end of it, what was it doing? It was squaring his sun and squaring his moon. And early on, it was squaring Saturn, right? So he's being cooked from the inside out. And I feel like that here, beyond feel, I have experienced it, right? I have experienced soul retrieval with a Saturn transit through the 8th house, and not soul retrieval in like a new age sense. I'm talking like I had split off part of my soul. You say, well, you can't really do that. Yeah, I think you can. And I split off part of my soul when I was 20 years old. And it took me through that Saturn transit of my 8th house. And I didn't even know I was doing it, to go back and retrieve part of my soul. It was pretty mind-blowing when I finally realized it. And I was realizing it kind of in the moment, you know, but there were so many things going, and it had to do with the Paul Horn concert that I produced. And so Tucker, he's going through something similar here, right? He's finding his soul through this whole COVID mess. And eventually it leads to his departure. Right here, the final degrees, right? That clock is ticking, and it's coming out of his 8th house to his 9th house. And it's like, okay, it's the dawn of a new day. What did you learn, Tucker? What did you take with you? He'd probably, if I was on his show, he'd probably be very skeptical of all this. So there you go. The radicalization of Tucker Carlson through astrology. I hope you guys saw it. It's right there. Right there. You know, he's got this really interesting connection with Trump. I've looked at their charts before. And Tucker is really, Trump is, they have a very strong connection. And I think for Tucker to have a relationship that's built on animus with Trump right now, it's probably been kind of painful. You know, he strategized with him. I remember one time he flew to Japan to meet with him to talk about his campaign. And, you know, you can see Trump's Saturn right on Tucker's ascendant. Trump's Venus is on his ascendant. I mean, this is very significant in terms of positioning in the chart. And I've gone through some of this before, and in their connection with each other. And it's even more interesting. I flip it around and you can see other stuff with Trump's chart as well. Like This is Trump's midheaven, and Tucker's sun is right on his midheaven. You see that right there? That's a pretty powerful conjunction. So in a lot of ways, it is a crying shame in some ways that these two guys couldn't figure out a way to fucking work together. And some people say, oh, they're probably working together right now. It's like, no, they're not. They're not. All right, let's take a look at Trump. And do the transits. I think he's in trouble. He's got Saturn going through his 8th house. It's the underworld. And I talked about this before, the opposition to Neptune. And here comes Mars. Mars coming into his 8th house. Opposing Neptune. Oh, man. Not good. Not good. You know, this is the phrase that comes to my mind when I see these transits. The Neptune opposition, Saturn-Neptune opposition, Mars-Neptune opposition. The devil has come to collect his due. It's quite interesting that Candace Owens talked about how you can't take all these riches with you when you leave. Can't. And she said, whatever you believe about Charlie Kirk, she said Charlie Kirk died free. He didn't have any spiritual or moral encumbrances. Like, he saw the light of day with Israel, theoretically. Another version of the story, or a version of the story that might also be true, is that he found out that Erica was having an affair and he wanted to divorce her. There's a lot behind the Charlie Kirk thing, but based on what we know, the emails and his quote unquote development, Charlie Kirk was not chained and encumbered like Donald Trump. Had he accepted the offer of Bibi Netanyahu to give TPUSA $150 million so that they could be a permanent ally for Israel on college campuses across America, for him to turn that down, that's freedom. Because Trump wouldn't have turned it down. He certainly didn't do it with Miriam Adelson. So he's in trouble. One man's opinion. He's in trouble. He's got Saturn squaring Mercury, Neptune squaring Mercury. You cannot, right now, I'm telling you, you cannot take anything he says as truth. And you could say, well, that would also be related to his talking shit and smack on Truth Social. I'm not even sure those are his words, by the way. So in that regard, yeah, maybe you could apply the same logic. But I wouldn't believe anything that comes out of this man's mouth. And, we're getting ready to have these nodes flip. And the first thing it's going to do when it goes into Leo, when that South node goes into Leo, it's going to hit his ascendant. That is not good. Not good. And Trump is going to imagine a time or remember a time when he believed he had power. And it's not going to work. I can tell you when it is, too. Let's see. What do we got here? The end of July. Now, the thing with the nodes is, of course, it'll retrograde and go back into Pisces a little bit. But true node is at 29 on the 30th of August. And then the north node is at 29 at the same day. It's when both of the versions of the node line up. Yeah, not a great time for the south node, to be honest, Mars. Now, maybe he'll remember what it's like to have some kind of a fighting spirit. I don't know. But you're in the neck of the midterms there, and I don't. Let's just say it'd be a whole lot better if the true node was on his ascendant, conjuncting his Mars. Whole lot better. So it's kind of like starting a battery and the battery's dead. Or starting a car and the battery's dead. There's no current left. So I think things with Trump are not good. They're just they're not good. Where is it? Oh, come on. Where are we? No. All right, you guys know. I've said my piece on it. Yeah, he's in the underworld. Saturn has taken him into the underworld. And the phrase that comes to mind is, the devil has come to collect his due. That's what it feels like. There's a price to pay for all the things that we take. And I think Donald Trump is about to, he's about to have to come to terms with that. I don't think it'll be pretty. There's nothing more difficult to watch than somebody who is in their decline and grasping at their powers that used to be. That's like the South Node on Mars. It's like, I know how to do this. I know how to do this. I'm a fighter, right? I can outbluster people. Sometimes I can bully people, and sometimes I can bullshit people. And sometimes I can crack jokes and be funny with people. And, and it's like, I know I can do this. I've done it before. And South Node says, this is not happening this time. Anyway, there we go. So what? 3 hours and 20 minutes of astrology. I hope you've enjoyed it. For those of you that have stuck around long enough to come to the end of the show. And, I hope you learned something about Tucker as well, because this guy has gone through a transformation. And in as much as the eternal skeptic in me always wants to see how things play out with people. Like I didn't like what he did with Nick Fuentes. I thought he was a bit more evolved than that. And maybe he's learned from it. Who knows? I don't know. But the transformation keeps taking place. And hopefully you've been able to see some astrological principles, cycles, all at work. The book is coming along great. We're doing some edits right now. I'm totally psyched about this book. Like, we could be staring down a book by the end of this month. Quite possible. And so I'll give you a little bit of background on the book. And big shout out to Jamie and Bruce for help putting it together. So using AI, they figured out a way to take my astrological course and put it into a book form. And, people ask me, hey, is there an astrological book that you can recommend for somebody getting into astrology? And you know what? I can. And it's going to be this one. Because it covers the entirety of my course. And it's got 26 chapters. And I'm really excited. Really, really excited. And, I feel like it could be one of those books that people recommend to other people who want to learn astrology. So, and again, you look at what's going on, like astrologically, and Jupiter's about ready to go into my 9th house of publishing. It's like, hello, I could use a little of that in my life. It might even spur me to actually do some writing, right? These are my words. They've just been put into a context by, for all intents and purposes, a very advanced program. So I will have at some point when the book comes out, kind of a deal and a companion with the video. We'll figure that out. So some people, the video is the course. So keep your eye out for that. And I'm really psyched. Maybe this book will help me get some interviews with people. That'd be great. I love being on other people's shows. Nobody ever invites me to be on their shows. So if you have a show, I'll be on your show. Robert at robertphoenix.com. That's where you can find me. All right. Thanks to our sponsor, True Hemp Science. Chattaria, you're the best. Thanks for being here. Hope you guys got something out of tonight. We'll be back on Tuesday with the Astro Weather. Some of you who attend the Sunday night service, you may want to check out the Astro Weather. We have a lot of fun. Last week was a good time. We kept it a little bit light during a heavy period, and try to do that every now and then. All right, God bless y'all. Love y'all, and carpe diem. Aries energy. Seize the motherfucking day. All right, bye for now.